Welcome to Postcards to the Universe with Melisa Caprio. Do you believe in magic? What if you were told that all you had to do was get a little creative and work a magic spell to bring anything you can imagine into your life? Here on Postcards to the Universe, we will share manifesting, tips, postcards, creativity, abundance, and prosperity. Here is your host, Melisa Caprio.
Hey guys, and welcome to Postcards to the Universe with Melisa, creating the life you crave. How are you guys doing on this Wednesday? I hope everyone who's listening to me is doing well. Love Wednesdays, love doing my show, and today I have another great show for you. For being with me each week. And if you're new to my show and you're listening for the first time, I want to say welcome. Thank you so much. And I hope you keep coming back. And just a little information for you. You can always catch a show on replay on OMTimes Radio. And I also upload the show on my website, postcardstotheuniverse.com. So you can always catch the shows if you can't come live. And a little bit about me, for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I am also an author and an artist myself. I'm a photographer. I have a book. It's titled Postcards to the Universe, Harness the Universe's Power and Manifest Your Dreams. And I feature 30 manifesting postcards in my book. And a manifesting postcard is kind of like a little mini vision board, So instead of doing like a whole life theme, you kind of like focus down on one area of your life and where you want to manifest. Like if you want more money, better health, romance, friendships, whatever it is that you are wanting. So if you're interested, and I hope you are, you can find my book, Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com, or if you're your local bookstore, just ask them if they don't have it in stock, and they will bring it for you. They'll get it for you. And I just wanted to share, too, that I just started doing something. I'm doing live readings from my book, so you can catch those on TikTok, Instagram, and also I'm sharing them on LinkedIn. So if you go to Postcards to the Universe, you can follow along if you like. And each week I ask people to keep sending me a manifesting postcard. You can find out about how to create one if you go to my website, postcardstotheuniverse.com. I tell you how to create one, how to set the space, the address and what to send it. So please, if you do that, let me know. I love getting them. It's very, very exciting for me. I'm like a kid in a candy store. I just got a message the other day that somebody is making one and sending it to me. So I'm so excited. So just let me know. And if you sign up for my Join My Movement, I do not spam people. I do not blast a lot of newsletters. Every once in a while, you'll get something from me, a nice little message. But if you do sign up, I have some free gifts for you. So check it out. If you like Facebook, I have a group called Postcards of Love. It's public. All we share is fun, inspirational stuff. So it's very light, very like feel-good kind of stuff. So check me out over there. I have been sharing probably for a little bit of over a month now. I'm doing a continuous workshop on Thursday evenings. It's a gratitude workshop, and it's called Manifesting Through Gratitude, a Visual Journey. It runs Thursday evenings, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's 5 weeks from beginning to end. And I recycle the course as it goes, and we talk about manifesting using gratitude, being grateful for the things that we already have in our life so that we can bring in more of those things, right? That's what we want to do. We want to bring more abundance in our life. But the difference with my workshop is we're going to be using our camera phones as part of our tools for manifesting. So we're going to be using that as an accessory, and it's a really strong way to manifest. So I break the course up in the major life themes. We are going to be focusing on our worthiness. We're going to be focusing on our relationships, romance, and relationships with friends and family and coworkers. We're going to be focusing on our health and wellness. And of course, money, our money story. We're going to be focusing on all of that. And it's very interactive. Every week we'll be making a manifesting postcard. It's online, so you can be doing it in your pajamas from your home, in the comfort of your home, with a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or whatever you want. So it's going to be a lot of fun. They are a lot of fun. And if you want to find out more about those and to register, you can go to my website again, postcardstotheuniverse.com, and there's a link that takes you to the workshops, and the workshop is being hosted on finduniquelyu, the letter u.com/Melisa Caprio. So yeah, please come and check it out. And at the end of the course, you're going to have a beautiful visual gratitude journal, which are really powerful. So when I mentioned earlier that I was doing live readings, since there are 30 manifesting stories and postcards in my book, what I'm doing now is I always share what I call a magical message. I post them on my social media. It's an image of a manifesting postcard. I photograph it with the person's message. And I'm re-photographing, because I'm doing the readings with the book, so they're sort of going side by side. I'm re-photographing the postcards that were in the book. And I realized how much better I've gotten since the book has been released. I'm like, wow. And it's really fun to kind of reinterpret them. So this week's is There is Beauty in the Breakdown. And this is one of my contributors. Her name is Eliza. It's her story, and it's her postcard. And her story was about letting go of an old love so that she can embrace her new love. So, of course, you either have to listen to my readings or buy the book to find out what her story is. But that's what this week's message is. There is beauty in the breakdown. Okay, so now I'm excited to talk to my guest today, Marie Antoinette Kelley. So she is an award-winning artist who has done hundreds of commissioned portraits, as well as the art for the Angel Quest Oracle. She has appeared on dozens of TV, radio, and podcast shows, and has been published in such magazines as Edge and Authority. Danny's Day in Heaven is a wonderful gift for anyone who has ever asked or had to answer the all-important question, what happens when we die? This beautifully illustrated children's book follows a young boy through his near-death experience to heaven and back. A happy ending helps to open the conversation between children and adults about what happens when we die. Danny is like any other kid on the beach. He wants to have fun, though he's a bit of a bully. While he's surfing the waves one day, a storm rolls in, catching him by surprise. The water pulls him under, and Danny finds himself going through a tunnel of colors and light, appearing in a radiant world with unexpected friends. What he discovers, who he meets, and the lessons he learns before returning to Earth will ease children's fears and give hope to readers both young and old about life after death. So if you want to find out more about it, you can check out Marie Antoinette's website, and more about Danny's Day in Heaven. Go to fineart.com. It's MAKFINEART.com. Welcome, Marie Antoinette. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you for the introduction. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh my God, I love the book so much, and I love your artwork. As a fellow artist, I love the drawings. They're just beautiful, and it really helps tell the story. And I think I really think it's a great book for kids because it leaves you feeling very comforted after the story, right? About what does happen when we die. So, okay, you're the author and the illustrator, and it's just amazing that you put it together. And you're talking about an NDE experience, which is near-death experience. And so what made you interested in creating the story and writing the story?
Well, I suppose there's a lot of ways to answer that because there's so many angles of my life that feed into that story.
I'm sure there are, right?
The main drive for it is that, I was a child who was really afraid of death. And so that stuck with me all through my life. And over the years, after I grew up as an adult, I started to find answers, near-death stories and what really happens when we die. And I kept thinking, I had my own kids along the way, and I kept thinking, we need to share this information with kids so they don't have to have that fear that I had and be left in the dark. Because I felt as a child, it was earlier, and now there's a lot of information out there, and probably there are quite a few parents who share the information that they've learned as grown-ups with their kids. But there isn't anything official for children that really helps them face the questions that are on their minds that I had as a kid, and that was one of my passions, to get that out.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, there are many books out there for adults on NDEs, and I know this book is loosely adapted from another author, and this person actually experienced an NDE. Was it is it Daniel Brinkley? Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel
Okay.
Brinkley. Yeah, he's one of a person with one of the most complete near-death experiences on record. He himself was dead for 32 minutes. And that was in 1975, I believe. So it was in the early days of when this phenomenon was first documented, and people would actually begin telling these stories. And of course, with all the medical advances, more people have had the chance to, die and be resuscitated. And in fact, I was also in that situation later on in my life, but that doesn't really come into play in this story. His story was so compelling to me. I found his story in the 90s. And I suppose this all dates me, but that's when I was first, growing up and coming out of that phase where I really, was dependent as a child on other people's insights, and I started to find my own. And so his story was one of the first that touched my heart of a first-hand account, empirical evidence. Yes, we don't die, we do live on. And it took it from, philosophy or religion, which is, of course, present in most of our lives in some way or another, to real evidence, a person really touching the other side and saying, yes, this is what happened to me. And that hit home so beautifully, and I felt such comfort from it. And that's actually when the first thought came to me, that here was the story that I wanted to tell for children. So it wasn't, again, secondhand or thirdhand, but first-hand experience for children, that they could see what happens when we die.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you said that you were scared of it, because as a young girl myself, I was scared too. I mean, I grew up, Catholic is my background. I'm not really a very religious person. I'm more of a spiritual person. And I remember being terrified of purgatory, because I couldn't understand what would get you into purgatory, because it was God, you could look at somebody the wrong way. Does that mean I'm going to be in a void for the rest of my life, right? It's terrifying to kids. So this is really comforting, because at the end of the book there is a message, and we'll get to that in a little bit, the message at the end of the book. But how do you think parents can, use your book to explain about death for the first time? I mean, did you do a lot of research for the book, talking to parents with young children, maybe that have had these kind of experiences, and before you created the book?
Well, yes and no. I mean, obviously the book has been, since I first thought of this idea in the 90s, it's been a while in the making. And, I was able to raise my own kids in that time period, and just my own personal experience, but also my natural interest is in spirituality and self-help and psychology. And so, yes, I have done the research. I have read a lot of material on it, but mostly I've also lived it and raised my kids with it. And I felt it's very natural for all of us, because I do believe that spirit is the other side of matter. It's the two sides of the same coin, and every one of us has a spiritual nature, and it's up to us how we, develop it and how we invest in it. But I would say 9 out of 10 kids have some sort of question about, the spiritual meaning of what happens, and they try and make sense of it through their religion, like you and I being raised Catholic. And it was the same for me, because I see now that I have a natural intuitive personality, and a lot of spiritual communication happening. But back then, I tried to fit that into this model that I was living within. And of course, I left so many questions unanswered. And I think it's that not having real answers that added up, that left death being equated as a black hole that gobbled people up, because you don't know with actual confidence that this is what happens. And so philosophy isn't so interesting to kids, more real life experiences is. And so when I started getting these answers, I naturally raised my kids with these answers, and it became such second nature for them to have context for spirit being the other side of our material, our physical existence. And so that continuum really was a natural part of their lives. And so when I started reading Daniel's story and then other people's stories, the whole thing bubbled down to like some fundamental ingredients that happen when we die. And I wrote about those in this book, through a story and adventure of Danny, who is modeled as a child version of Daniel Brinkley. But yeah, so I took some liberties with his story because he, for example, had his near-death experience through a lightning strike. And of course, I couldn't take that literally because a child can't recover in 32 pages from a lightning strike.
Right,
and
of
so
course.
that would have been a little bit difficult. So I had to make an adaptation in that case, make him, face death through drowning so he could be resuscitated. And what happens to him, though, in the dying experience is modeled after Daniel's experience as well as other people that have documented their near-death experience. And so it includes things like, the tunnel, the coming to the other side, which is just unconditional love and light, and meeting a guide of your own, and then having your life review, and meeting loved ones who have passed on already. Those are really common elements. And, researchers who have studied this from an official scientific phenomenon have found these common elements are independent of religion or cultural background. So it isn't that you have to believe a certain way to expect this part of, death to be true for you. So those are the kind of elements that I highlighted in this book so that we can give a foundation to our kids rather than tell them how to believe or what to think. We just give them the elements so that parents who then introduce this book, I think that was your question, how do you as a parent handle this book? They can take this as the fundamentals of, dying or death, and then add their philosophy or add their spiritual beliefs or their religion and fit that within it, because there is an obvious subjective element to spirit because it's very personal to each and every one of us and where our hearts are. And that element is for people to include themselves.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to ask you that about people from different religions and cultures of having similar experiences, from the documented experiences of people that have had NDEs, the traveling through the light and the meeting the guides and the unconditional love. So that's really, really interesting that that's kind of a common theme for all the different people from all the different walks of, life.
Isn't
having
it?
those. Yeah, it really, really
cool.
is. It is really, really cool.
It's beginning to verify for us, because life has gotten so existential and there's so much dread among the kids. Like, what do they believe in and where does it all, how does it matter? And I feel this is kind of like the coat rack and they can hang their own little elements on it, because there is a truth to spirit and there is, a base experience that we all have that we will then fill the details in based on how we have, used our consciousness and our own choices, like whether we are Hindu or Buddhist or Christian. And so the afterlife will shape, according with the unconditional love and support from the spiritual realm, it'll shape according to where we have explored and where we have invested our consciousness. But the main steps are there. And so for this book, I use Daniel's main idea.
Now, let me ask you, going off of that, have you had any pushback from people? Do some people find it, because there's always those people. There's always those people out there, right? So that have said, like, you shouldn't be talking about this with children, that kind of stuff.
No, I have not had that kind of pushback. The overwhelming majority of the feedback has been, what a godsend to have this story so that we can lay the foundation and begin the discussion. There has been a little bit in the pre-publishing phase that was making me chuckle because, the basic idea, for example, is also a Daniel experience. Like, let me tell you why. Because Daniel was a self-described bad guy. He was in the army at the time. He had his near-death experience, and he grew up in the Bible Belt. And he says he was anything but religious. And if anybody, he says, should have gone to hell, it would have been him because of how he had spent his life. And he himself found himself on the side of love and light, and he was being made to discover how much potential his heart had to love and how much spiritual power he had that he wasn't tapping into. So when he came back with that message, his whole life changed. And so I took that element in this book and I made Daniel Danny, little Danny, and that's why he's a bully in the book, because
Right.
it's taking you away from the idea that you earn access to heaven and that you have to be a do-goody or live by a strict
Yeah.
code of conduct that fits into a religious perspective, but it's more about the quality of your heart and your spiritual nature. And so it's so funny because some people were really disappointed. Like the traditional Christian perspective is like, well, that's at odds with that because there is a certain code of
Right.
conduct that they
Right.
want to follow in order to get there. And then there was people who read it and they said, this is too Christian of a book because it said you can get into a place of good. And I was like, you can't please everybody.
You can't.
And it's not about that. It's not about pleasing
Right.
people. It's really, I think the fundamental nature of spirit is definitely shining through the book. There is a truth to the spiritual dimension that's undeniable, and it is made of unconditional love. And when you get there, you don't necessarily get there through being a good person, but if you activate your heart and your spiritual power, you will find that. And if you haven't yet, you will find that. And either way, you come back. Most people that have had a near-death experience come back with the knowing of what they're capable of and what the power of love really means and how they want to
Right.
create with that. And that's definitely coming through with this book.
Oh, for sure. Well, I love that you made Danny a bully, actually. I was happy that he was a bully because part of Danny's journey is seeing how his bullying affected the other people around him. And what he got from it was he was still loved regardless of the fact that he was a bully or not. And it made him want to be better when he returned to Earth. He didn't want to be that anymore. And that, I think, is a profound message for all of us, but especially for children, right? Especially for them who are either are being bullied or are a bully themselves. I mean, what a lesson for them. Like, even if you are doing this, because I can't imagine a kid, even if they are a bully, do not feel some sense of shame inside themselves, because you can't like yourself if you're a bully. You just can't, right? You don't love yourself. You don't like yourself. So just knowing that there's still a place for you on the other side, right?
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out, because I totally agree. I feel that this book is meant to empower anybody who has the interest in reading it, because it's like, if you are a bully, yes, there's a reason why you're hurting inside. And now, most of that is an external reason. Either conditions in your life haven't been favorable or people have been mean to you yourself. And finding the power of your heart and your power to your spiritual power to create physically while you're here alive could turn that around. And people that already have a loving heart could just take it to the next level, and I feel that they could see the effect that even a bully has on people and deserves a second chance. And obviously, it's not even about deserving a second chance. In that sense, it does get away from the traditional Christian message because it's discovering the true nature of your being. And that's what most people come back with in one form or another who have had documented near-death experiences. They discover the true nature of themselves. And it was never the repressed or limited vision they had of themselves while they were just physical beings. There's something so much more profound in their hearts and in their being that they access and then bring back. And so I'm now doing that through a kid's eye.
Yeah, you're doing that through a child's eye. So so what is really also is I love about the book is your artwork. And so your artwork, I'll just ask you the question. So how does your artwork connect to the message in the book? Because your artwork tells its own story. Even without reading the words, you can kind of get the story, right? Good.
It's so funny because that's been such a long journey because, my mind was ready for this story and then the rest of my whole person had to catch up to the rest of it. And I think it was a lot of spiritual growth for myself with this book because when I first had this idea, I was just becoming aware that I could be an artist. And it all happened because my neighbor moved. I was actually on a track for science and becoming a medical doctor. And I had my kids, and I put it all on hold, and it started that bold quest of, like, what should I do? And in that phase, this book came through. And so my neighbor then moved, and she had a video cassette that said, yes, you can draw. And she goes, hey, would you like to share that with your kids? You could all study it together because you homeschool. And I was like, Oh my gosh, I remember. I used to draw when I was a teen, and that's the hint. That was like a clue from heaven, that told me to pick up a pen, and I started picking up, and out came these portraits. And it was so funny because I remember now my name is Marie Antoinette, and I remember my first website at that time said, "Here I am, Marie Antoinette, drawing nothing but heads."
Right.
The universe has such a sense of humor, but anyway, so long story short, I evolved through my artwork, and so there's been several renditions of this, but the main question that nagged me through all of it, because writing for children makes you really take accountability that you are honest and sincere and true, so you don't feed them something that, you say is going to help in their fears, but it isn't really, solid. I was really committed to making it a solid message of truth, and then I had this overwhelming, nagging problem inside of me. Like, I haven't been to the other side officially in the same way that all these people had near-death experiences have. And how do I know? And, I started wondering. And that was a really good question, turned out to be a really good question, because of overall the asking and growing, I realized it isn't the literal mind that goes to the other side. It isn't the rational facts of us that need to have, okay, this is what buildings look like, this is what people look like. But it's obviously a world of vibration and frequency. And so what I then learned is that I had to capture the feeling of heaven and the love of heaven and the bright, abundant potential of all those energies. And that's what I ended up painting into the picture. So it isn't that I'm telling you what heaven looks like. It's that I'm showing with the artwork what it would feel like. And hopefully that then prompts the reader to feel that and then spark their own inquiry and their own memories, and then they have their connection to take it from there.
Yeah. Well, you accomplished that, so I have to say.
Thanks.
It's just looking at the work alone. Yeah, I mean, just looking at the rainbows and the way the rainbow was behind them when she sees his dog. We'll get more into it when we come back. I just looked at the time, so let's take our break here, and then we'll talk more about that when we come back. So everybody stay tuned, and I'll be back in just a few minutes with Marie Antoinette talking about more of this wonderful, wonderful book, Danny's Day in Heaven. Stay tuned, and we'll be back. All right, so we're talking about your artwork connecting to the message in the book. And, I mean, obviously, you guys have to buy the book to read the book to see what I'm talking about. But it's how you would picture, I mean, at least for me, being an artist, especially with the color and everything, it's how I would picture, especially from a child's perspective, of what it would look like, right? With the bright colors and the rainbows and the heavens. And I loved that Danny gets to see his beloved dog who comes running up to him.
Right.
Yeah.
The message that was so healing for me, the message that you never lose who or what you love. Because that's the nature of spirit, and you come back together. And that is so empowering, because that is the whole foundation of our grief and our loss, is that they're gone, we've lost them, and we only can remember them. And that turns out to be not true. There's not just memory from the past, there's anticipation of the future, and that's really, really healing for most people.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, that knowing that your loved ones are not lost to you forever. You're going to be reunited, right? And it's just like such a comforting message. And I imagine for children, it must be really comforting, because it is scary for all of us imagining losing our loved ones. I lost my sister last year, and it's been very hard, but I have a strong belief and knowing that we're going to be reunited again. So I don't have that added extra, I'm never going to see her again. I know I'll see her again. Well, and there's even
another level. I don't want to just think after we die we get to go back, because that's another subtler theme for me with this book, is that my hope is that children who are very naturally very intuitive, because their rational mind is still just waking up when they're teenagers, and so many children have spiritual gifts and connection with people from the other side, and so now having a more natural context for that, so that they can share that idea with their loved ones, would possibly enhance these connections, so that you wouldn't, for example, have to wait to connect with your sister until you are yourself on the other side. But there's little moments and glimmers in between. And that actually brings me to a story, because, your show is Postcards from the Universe. And I have a painting called Postcards from Heaven. And that is one of the really influential paintings for me in my journey to solidly coming to terms with the reality of the other side, not through other people's stories, but through my own. And it was from is it okay if I tell that story?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah,
Okay,
please.
okay,
No,
okay.
tell the story. I love these stories. They're my favorite because I get messages from my sister all the time. Like, she's always doing stuff.
Yeah.
So I know we're still connected. So, yeah, please share your story.
And that's the whole idea, because I know how natural it is. And that, also with me having been raised without real answers, and it became kind of like an us and them thing, or perhaps or maybe. And it's really, once you get past that and understand it's the other side of ourselves, it's so natural to let that be part of your life without a big hullabaloo. And so as I went through that internal training myself, I was struggling with these images over the course of the years and how I was going to capture that feeling. And I felt like I needed to really get it from, some firsthand feedback from the other side. Well, I do mostly portraits, and I paint portraits of people, and it turns out that it's really easy for me to capture them when they have already passed away. It's probably because the ego is no longer interfering, and their own personal, inhibitions aren't really part of their own energy field anymore, which is what I tune into when I paint them. So this person, all of a sudden, I had friends. They lived a door down from me, and then they had moved to Colorado, and for 8 years I hadn't spoken to them at all, or lost complete touch with them. And then I heard through the grapevine that he had died and that she was left behind. This is a couple, and so I felt, all of a sudden this really warm, nostalgic feeling in my head, like, oh, I used to know them so well. I love that they are such cool people. I need to paint them, and it became like this push inside I need a painting. I need to paint. So I felt compelled to paint his portrait for his memorial service. So I went online and I found a photo, and I made it as a surprise for his wife. And so as I sat down, I felt really guided to pick meticulously for the first time over my art career, and my own skills were evolving. I picked an entire palette of colors before I even started, and it was also harmonious and precise. And I realized, gosh, that's Stephen, the man that I ended up painting, and he was so much like that. And I started to realize that he was very much influencing me, with his painting. So he spilled out of my fingers. I came up with a beautiful portrait. I was really moved by it. There was a lot of, internal guidance from, I felt from him in terms of color and just the energy of it. And I felt like at night when I would go to sleep while I was working on this portrait that I could come with him to travel through the, different dimensions of the other side. And I see him with his wife, and I remember distinctly impression feeling like, oh, I don't want to come because it's for you to show your wife. I don't belong in that mystery with the two of you. So that's kind of my inner communications, which was really just still my personal way of relating to the portrait. But then when the portrait was finished, I sent it to his wife and for the memorial, and it was a surprise to her. So of course it brought her to tears because it was so meaningful. But then this is where it really hit the clincher. She goes, oh my gosh, she goes, this is my postcard from heaven, because Stephen was dying from cancer. And he had gotten closer to the end, consciously knowing he was going to pass. And even though he had been very spiritually minded, as he got closer, he started to doubt it all. Was it just philosophy? Was it just wishful thinking? And so they had made a pact together, and they had said, should you find that you are still alive on the other side and it isn't blackout, please send me a postcard. And this is what he had done. He had found out. And so I didn't know anything about that because they lived, 10 hours away from me. And so he had found me available for that postcard. And I was like, why am I so feeling so much pressure to paint him? And she put it all in a row. She goes, that's why. He committed to sending me a postcard. And that was the beginning of really a cool breakthrough, because then I knew I was actually part of a really profound spiritual communication between two people that didn't even live near me, that I had no knowledge of their conversations with. And I got used to that. And that was the beginning of me paying close attention to my internal experiences when I draw, when I paint, because, you draw from the right brain and you get so intuitive I do when I paint. And that was the beginning of me really understanding how much communication happens from the spiritual dimension that we tend to dismiss or rationalize or want explanations for, but it's really part of our life all the time. And that's kind of what I am hoping as a secondary message, besides just what happens when we die, to establish in children that heaven is a real place. It's a real spiritual vibration and realm that we weave into our lives. And it's not out there somewhere at some point in time, but it's here now and constantly supporting us.
Yeah. So it's almost like you're channeling without actually knowing that you're channeling from the spirit, right? As you're painting, because you get into that energetic space, you're a vibrational match, you're open to
and
receiving.
I get out of my own way.
And you get out of your own way, because that's what always happens to us. We are always in our own way, in our own head, in our own ego, right? So, no, I love that. I love that that happens. I believe in that wholeheartedly. I think we get messages all the time from heaven or the universe or whatever people want to say, and I'm a big believer in that. So I totally resonate with that story. And what a gift! What a gift to his wife. I mean, that is just beautiful.
It was super. It was a gift for all of us, because for me it was a gift, especially since I started with being afraid in the first part of my life, and then I started being a science student, having a clamped down rational mind. So it was all very liberating to realize the natural place of it all. It was very healing for all of us. For them in a different way than for me, but it was healing for all of us, because it's continued to happen with other people. And so I've got a lot of those stories now, and they gave me the confidence to write this book, to say, children, really it is inevitable, but you're going to find out if you keep that voice alive and you just remember the feeling of heaven, the feeling of connectedness, the feeling of inspiration and of intuition, and then that finds a place in your life. And then that existentialism that teenagers are so plagued by, and that the rat race starts taking over. They won't have a grip. That's my wish. It won't have the same grip on people. They can have that flow.
Have you? When was your book released? What was the?
Just this June.
Just
so
this
pretty
past
recently.
June.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you had any feedback from any parents yet who have read the story to their own children? I know we're early.
Yeah.
We're only in September, right? But still.
But there has been some, obviously. There has been some kids that like me that have been afraid and have been questioning, and they're so comforted. But it's so funny to me that so far the most inspiring feedback has been from grown-ups, because they themselves are like trying to grasp, what happens when we die, and they kind of need a child's, children's book to kind of, peek and get permission to go back to their own, playful nature, I suppose, about it. So it isn't so heavy, but I've had people saying, oh my gosh, everybody, this needs to be like a textbook in school so that people can just free. And it's not because, I don't think it's so much the book itself, even though I did my very best with it. It's the concept that we can freely talk about what happens when we die, and that it's a colorful, supportive experience, because we've only looked at it from our physical reality, which is loss and bleakness. And I'm not diminishing the grief, because there's some real tragic circumstances that people really have to process. But if that other side is just constantly, glimmering through, and if that has more conversation, then I think we begin to have a new approach to death and make it find its proper place, because none of us get out of here alive. So
not last I heard.
Right.
Right.
But it's funny how adults want to see this book. They want to bring it to their kids. And I have grandkids now, and my little grandson, he's so cute. He looks at all the pages and he's just like, there's Golden Land, and there's Golden Land again. And
that's sweet.
But that is just so natural. You really can see that they recognize the feeling of it like a natural part of their being. And for grown-ups, I'm noticing
they remember. A lot of them remember, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not too far since they've been on this planet from being there. It's like when we're older, we're like, we get crotchety and cynical and wow.
That's what I've actually noticed, is that the grown-ups are having the big healing ahas, because they're remembering as well, and they're finding positivity in a way that they haven't kept it alive. So it's interesting. It seems to be affecting whoever reads it. So I'll see more.
Yeah, you will. Well, since it's only been basically 2-3 months already, I'm sure you're going to see more and more.
Yeah.
And what is some of the reactions from your children, like your own children? Was it like, just like, oh, Mom, I'm not surprised you did this. Like, this is just, we grew up talking about this kind of stuff. So of course you would do something like this. Your family and
but
stuff.
It's funny how you're teaching manifesting and everything, but there was like several phases of this book that I told you it was like my life journey to grow up and let my, my spiritual nature kind of integrate with my physical self, because I wanted in the beginning to get this book out, but I realized now that it was more of an ego-based statement, like, look, this needs to go out there. It healed me, whatever. It was more about I can do it, and it was very much blocked every step of the way. It was just the timing wasn't right, or it just didn't find its outlet, to the point that I got actually really frustrated with it, and I realized that I didn't want to do any more of it. I parked it on the shelf, and it was funny because I had a true desire to get it out there, but I was trying to make it on my own effort, and it wasn't succeeding. And so it was a manifesting lesson for me to let it up to God or universe or spirit, however you relate to it, and let it find its journey with the right timing. And then I ended up becoming the artist for an Angel Quest Oracle deck with Karen Noe, who was an angel medium. And that one thing led to the next, and then this book just resurfaced all on its own, just like my husband mentioned it, and the publicist said, can we see it? 3 days later, I had the contract, and it was just like, bam! It was like, oh my gosh, here it goes.
That's how it happens.
I had let it go so completely that it was clearly the book needing to go out for the message that it has for people. And at that point, it had nothing to do with me anymore. But at the same time, I had enough of a rich life journey to understand that I was also living its message, and it wasn't a book that has to tell any one person's story. It was a book that talks about the reality of the spiritual realm that underlies our existence, and it was getting me out of the way, and then it was getting published on its own, kind of feeling.
Love it. Well, that's how it happens, because when we're trying to force something, and we're not ready for it, or it's not ready, or the world isn't ready, we think we know better, right? And that's when you have to take a step back, and you have to say, you know what, I just gotta say, okay, universe, all right, God, I'm open to whatever. I am not gonna force it anymore.
That's one part of it. If I look at it, though, I had to actually let the book die. Isn't that funny? Because it's a near-death experience. The book
I believe you. You have to, because you don't know the big impact. See, you don't see the impact of your work. You'll never see the full impact of your work. All you know is your job was to create it, put it out there, and let it go. And wherever it's meant to fly is where it's meant to fly. And it may not have been the right time. Like, that's why I always say, when people who make postcards and they're like, why didn't it's not happening, or it hasn't, like, there's a reason. Just have trust, and divine timing is really essential. So let God or the universe or your angels or whatever you believe work on the when and the how, and you just keep going on with your life, right? And enjoying your life.
That's so true. And for so much of that, it's nice feedback and nice, confidence building, lessons. But I wasn't living them. I had to actually learn to have the trust. I had to actually learn to let the book go. And so I couldn't just intellectually say, oh yeah, I'll just trust, because I wasn't. I had to let it go, and then it found its own expression. So that was really good for me, to realize that I had to learn to understand what the book was about for my own life, through my own life experience. So it was very cool.
Yeah, you have to do that. Like, when my book came out, it came out right before COVID, so the timing was not good, right? So now we're 3.5 years later, and then one day, all of a sudden, somebody said something in my head and said, you should read the book you should start reading you should read it. Just read it online. Just read it. Put it on social media. And I went, all right. I don't know where it came from. So I just decided to, because whoever needs to hear what I put in the book that I want to talk about is going to get the message, and that's the person who needs to hear it, and however they're going to hear it from there, and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to trust that, because that's how Postcards to the Universe was born. I heard it. It just came to me one day, and I just started from there, and it hasn't led me astray. You know, it's always led me exactly where I need to go. So I've gotten better.
It's on its own journey, and you're following along.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's on its own journey, and I'm following the clues. I'm going to take that if you don't mind. I'm going to use that.
Oh, not at all. I mean, that's how I've experienced it too, and that's been really beautiful to surrender myself to that, so that I don't have to have all the answers up front anymore, and I can kind of stay aware and like we just said, follow the journey and follow the clues. But it's been a beautiful journey. To be part of.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something about doing the Angel Quest. So I was going to ask you how you became an illustrator doing these angel oracles, because they sound really, really interesting. I love oracle decks. I am like one of those people that I'm a collector. I don't even necessarily need to know how the oracles work. I just I'll see them and I'm like, ooh, I need another set, you know?
Yeah, that was actually a really educational process for me as well, because it taught me. I was contracted to make all the artwork, and then Karen Noe is an angel medium from New Jersey. Okay. She has a 2-year waiting list, and so she realized that she didn't have a deck of her own, and she's constantly interacting, and so she came up with the words, and she's the one who contacted me. It was a Sunday morning. I remember she woke up in the morning, and she felt that the angels had told her. She knew of me because she had used my husband as a publicist for her previous books, and so the angels put an inspiration in her heart that she needed to contact me. So I got that message, and I was like, oh my God, that's been what I've been wanting to do. I just didn't know with who. So the two made a match, and we got to work, and it was a really good learning process, because that in itself was a lot of, I struggle with that same question. Who am I to, paint all these angel messages when I don't know for sure what it really embodies. So I made sure that every time I had that feeling, I would go to the place inside of me where I needed to experience it. So the deck is really coming from a place of almost what's the word I'm looking for? Like symbolism, or just a message that holds an energy again, so that it reminds you of the energy from the other side, rather than it traditionally depicts just angels, because so many people have interpreted angels, and who are we to say this is what they look like or that's what they look like? So it's very much about, I believe the language of spirit is a language of symbolism, and so it has a lot of symbolism in the artwork, and so each piece of art can really take on its message to that level. But there was a point in it that we really both got stuck, and so she would take that to her altar and then get a message from the angel you'd be working with, that was for us, one of us confidence. It's it's time to break through your own hang-ups and let your artwork, that sort of stuff. And so it would move us through the feelings. And what the beautiful thing of it was is that at the end, when the deck came out, which is just recent as well, about a year and a half ago, I got it at home, and I pulled it out and I used it with my whole family. Every person got a message that was so spot on, and I realized, oh my God, it had gotten bigger than the sum of its parts. It was not just artwork and beautiful messages. It had taken on a life that really conveyed the truth of spirit and the support of your angel network and the support of your own higher self. And it was exciting. I realized, oh my gosh, we are just players in a bigger universe, and that we're being used for our talents to get positivity into the world and to get people inspired to find their gifts and their connection to spirit. So that's what I love doing.
I love that. I'm actually in process of creating my own oracle deck with my own photos.
Oh, cool.
So, it's
so
exciting.
You're going through that very process. Yes. You know how hard it is.
Yeah, it is. But it's interesting. So I'm just curious, what is your process? So when you sat down as an artist, and people who are listening who are artists, what's your process? When you were creating those, did you feel like you were getting the angels were talking to you directly and saying,
sure.
Marie Antoinette, I want this to look like this? Is that how you felt it was going through you when you were doing these?
That's a little bit of both. It was definitely, I experienced a lot through my dreams. My dreams are very lucid, and so I do get messages through that. And so some of the paintings, I got direct, images of what I needed to paint or what it needed to feel like. Other stuff, because there's 44 cards in here, so they didn't all happen like that. Some of them was just me paying attention to what I was struggling with in my life, and then how I was breaking through it. And it was always, because I have a developed language of working with, spirituality and symbolism. And so I would pay attention to what got me through, and I would feel the support of the angels behind that. So those are the more, more abstract or psychological images, perhaps. But they're all definitely experienced firsthand, every one of them. Yeah.
Nice. I mean, just beautiful. Well, I can see that from your work. If you check out her website, you'll see her style of art, and I could see how that would happen. Those insights would come to you, and that inspiration.
Yeah, like you start with the left
yeah.
brain mapping it out with everything you know, and then inevitably you get stuck, right? You're like, okay, now what? This is only taking it so far. And then comes the point where you just have to let it go, and then the inspiration comes flooding in to just take it to the next level. And that's kind of how my process happens. It's like, birth of anything. You're a creator.
Yeah, it's hard to describe. Like when people say, like, well, what makes you photograph whatever, how you photograph, and I can't really put it in words. It's just, I don't know. I just get called, things come to me, ideas, and it's become more intuitive now. So it's like I can't really describe it in like a physical sense, and So
but then you would use your left brain with everything you know about photography and how to make the right. So it's really a melting of both halves of your brain, right?
Yeah, it really is.
It is for me.
So, what other messages do you want the listeners to get today from about you, about the work that you do, about your latest book? Danny's Day in Heaven, NDEs. Like, what do you want to leave us with? Because we only have, I think, like 5 minutes, so I want to make sure you get to share your message. I know we can talk for like hours. Okay,
right, we could. It's really fun. Well, that's a big question, but I suppose the same way, because we talked about that, how this is really just, we are participating in this journey, and that this book and the angel deck, and especially this book, Danny's Day in Heaven, is meant to help us remember how powerful we are from our own spiritual perspective, and how we are guided by God, angels, the higher self, the spiritual realm, to make our lives work, to make our gifts matter, to make, our contributions that I think we envisioned, before we even got born. And then, when the world takes over, you kind of forget a little bit. So I'm hoping that my work and any of those, images will prompt the confidence in the listener to grow and to feel their own potential, and to activate their own spiritual connection to a new level, so they can contribute what their heart wants to contribute. Because that's what I feel I learned, and I enjoy myself. Yeah.
Good.
And I hope that very much for children, so that especially when because fear is one of the worst that blocks everything. It blocks your creativity. It blocks your freedom to love and live. And that's what this main thrust is. Please don't be afraid of death. Death is a doorway, and it's nothing to be afraid of, because you don't lose, you transform. You transform into love, light, and consciousness, and you stay yourself, but you can't take your physical body with you, nor can anybody who dies, but that's the extent of it.
What is your dream? What is your dream for your book? What do you imagine? Where do you imagine it could go? What do you imagine doing with it? Or that you could do with it?
Well, in all honesty, when I had to let it die, about 10 years ago, I gave up the dreams with it, because I realized that the book had to find its own way out. And now that it found its way out, it's kind of like your kids, You don't dream all the dreams for your kids. You let your kid find the dreams. So I haven't taken it back to that level. But of course, my wish is that everybody in the world gets to read it, so they all lose the fear of death, and we can start creating from that place of love and wonder. And that would make the world such a cool place. So I would hope that it could take it in that direction. But in all honesty, I've let it go a little bit, because the book and what I said before, I'm surprised that, I'm loving it at the time it is now, because with all the COVID and all the depression and the darkness out there, I'm loving it that this is the right time, and that the book has finally found its way into the world, so that people can feel its comfort. My hope is that it comforts people.
Well, and I don't see how. I mean, it's very easy to read. And what's the? I'm as far as for publishers. What is the age range of this book? I mean, anybody can read it, but publishers like. Publishers like to have like it's for this group, that's how they market it.
Right. So officially it's for 6 to 10-year-olds, but it's really for people of all ages. And I suppose my dream, answering that question, my dream is that it becomes a staple on everybody's bookshelf so that we can embrace the power of our own spirit and face the fear of death and begin creating the love that we have, all of us.
It would be great if it was, in schools, if kids could read it in elementary school.
Great.
Right?
Oh,
and then they could have a discussion with each other and a teacher. Yeah, that would be really, really good.
Cool.
I think so too. Because not only is it about not being afraid of what happens after we die, it also is a great message for kids who are being bullied or who are bullying. And that's a big problem in schools. So it's like a double edge, right?
Thank you. I like that. Thank you for helping me articulate that. That's awesome.
I like that too. Okay, so Marie, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Well, I have a website that has my email on it, and that's like you mentioned earlier, at makfineart.com. MAK is my initials, but it could stand for May. And so I'm also on Instagram and Facebook on those handles, MAKFineArt, hashtags, I guess. And that would be great.
Well, it was such a pleasure. So, guys,
thank you. It was so wonderful.
Thank you. And thank you for listening to Postcards to the Universe with Melissa, creating the life you crave. And I'm wishing everyone a wonderful week filled with joy, abundance, and love. Peace.